Good morning, everybody. Wow, we got people pouring on. That's awesome. Good to see you all here. Welcome. Welcome this morning. Gosh, it's a beautiful morning here. I don't know where you all are coming from. If you want to type into, we have a lot of new people on here, and some of you are unfamiliar to me. And so if you want, go ahead and drop into the comments box where you're joining us from. That would be awesome. So welcome to Greater Life, Greater Impact. If you're new, as many of you know, I'm a quantum healing practitioner, and I work with people one-on-one doing private mentoring. And I notice patterns when I work with people. And so one of the reasons why I love doing these free classes once a week is so we can have conversations that will open us up, all of us, including myself, and expand our view, expand our horizons, and share experience with one another. And you guys are really good at sharing, and I really appreciate that. If you feel prompted to share and interject, you're welcome to unmute your mic. You're welcome to unmute your camera. You're welcome to type stuff into the chat box as we have this conversation today on becoming a free spirit. I love this topic so much. What prompted the year's theme for this year, which is personal sovereignty, spiritual sovereignty. We're going to be talking about this throughout the year this year. And what prompted it is that the more that I work with people, the more that I engage with them in my private mentoring practice, I see that there's a pattern. And one of the first steps in spiritual awakening or the discovery of your higher self is awareness. There has to be a level of awareness as to who you are. We're going to get into that just a little bit more, but I came across this really cool book not very long ago by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Friedrich Nietzsche. Some of you may have heard of him. I don't know what time period he's from. I think he's from like the 1800s or early 1900s, but he wrote a book called Human, All Too Human, a book for free spirits. And as I came across that book, I started to discover some really fascinating concepts and principles that really resonated with my soul as I feel like one of my roles in life is to help hold space for people as they step into their own sovereignty and into their own, into themselves, into the becoming of themselves. I think that there's so much programming and so much conditioning that goes on in culture that we often lose our ability to become our truest selves. And so this book really fascinated me in that regard. One of the things that he says at the beginning of his message is that only by becoming a free spirit are you able to enjoy life to the fullest and become who you truly are. And I believe that resonated so much with my soul. By becoming a free spirit, you'll be able to enjoy your life and actually become who you were meant to be on this planet. So with that being said, before I actually go into some of the attributes of what he says a free spirit is, I would love to hear from each and every one of you. If you're willing to open up your mic, type something into the chat. What do you feel? What are you feeling in regards to what a free spirit is? What does that mean to you to be a free spirit, to step into your own autonomy and sovereignty as a human? What does it really mean to be a human and a free spirit in this human nature that we're all finding ourselves in? So while I'm waiting for you guys, you're more than welcome to unmute or just type your thoughts down into the chat box as you start thinking through what does that mean to you. While I wait for you guys to kind of get warmed up to the idea of commenting on this, I'm just going to share with you some of the principles, and feel free to interject, feel free to raise your hand, feel free to interrupt, whatever you guys got to do. While I'm waiting for you guys to get brave enough to do that, hold on. I'm going to share with you some of the things that Dr. Nietzsche says, what it means to be a free spirit. Already we have Carla saying, connected to my heart body and mind. Yes, I love that. That's a great definition. Ashley says, not being held back by the limitations of the world. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I want you to, as we talk about some of these conditions or these attributes of what it means to be a free spirit, I want you to be thinking in your own mind, what does that look like for you? What is your life going to have to look like if you were to step more into the sovereignty of your own soul? Nicole says, free spirit is someone who is anchored in who they truly are. Yes, I believe that as well. And I think that's something that comes out in this book by Friedrich Nietzsche. Katie says, just be in the presence and knowing all is well. Yes, standing in your own sovereignty, standing in your own essence, your own presence, knowing that it is what it is and I'm okay, right? There's no threat to who you are as a being. Good. Anybody else? Okay, so some of the things that Friedrich says in his book is that to be a free spirit is somebody who is in charge of their own actions. So, and I kind of look at that as being taking responsibility, taking ownership and responsibility for who you are as a human being and what kind of actions you exhibit and manifest in your life. The other thing is, he says, a free spirit is someone who is capable of formulating their own worldviews aside from the prejudice of the world, aside from the prejudice and the programming and the social norms and the groupthink and what culture tells you is acceptable or not acceptable. He also says a free spirit is someone who is not dependent on their external relationships, on their relationships with others, not dependent on father, mother, spouse, siblings, whoever, whatever, your boss, not dependent on those relationships for the full and complete expression of your soul. David's iPhone says, grounded in peace versus chaos in the busy mind. Oh, it's Pam. Okay. Yes. Yes, I agree with that. Grounded in peace versus the chaos of the busy mind. So in some ways, then, being a free spirit is someone who has a good, healthy balance of both the intellect and the intuition, basically a connection between the mind and the heart. So you know how to govern your thoughts, but you also know how to operate authentically in your emotions at the same time. And not one or the other is better than the other, but there's balance and harmony there. So that was great. Thank you for sharing that. Grounded in peace. The other thing that he shares is that a free spirit is somebody who has the courage to be authentic. Have you ever met people in your life who were just a total free spirit and they didn't care about what the culture or what the world around them or people around them thought about them? They just live in an open way. And, you know, sometimes some of those people are so free that they step on toes or they start to offend others. And part of the reason I think for that is we get insecure around people who live in a place, in a space of total freedom, and they don't care about what the rest of the world seeks to program you to be or say or think. And so in our insecurity, then it's easy for us to get offended by their behaviors. But have you ever met somebody that was like that was a free thinker, a free spirit, didn't apologize for who they were or what they thought or necessarily how they behaved? Although I do feel like there's a balance. So in that freedom of expression that you have, if you do know that you're stepping on toes, you're willing to also be humble and you're willing to also be bendable. And Michelle says, I'm married to one. Awesome. Awesome for you. That's really amazing. Okay, so, there was one more that he recommends, that he talks about in this book, and we're going to go over these a little bit deeper, but the other one that he brings out in his comments are that a free spirit is someone who's willing to stand up against tyranny, somebody who is willing to stand against popular opinion or popular beliefs that, rather than just go along to get along in blind obedience to authoritarian voices in government, in religion, in the medical community, in the work field, in the workforce, wherever you find yourself being subject to authoritarian voices, a free spirit is definitely somebody who resists the tyranny of the control and manipulation that is put upon people, that has been put upon people over the course of the lifespan of this planet. So I loved that, not willing to buy into social programming or just tradition. Sometimes tradition isn't always the best way. And so it's good to be willing to step outside of the box or think outside of the box. In order to do that, you got to have an open mind, right? Okay. All right. He also says we have great potential on this earth to be free spirits, but oftentimes we live well beneath our privileges and our opportunities to do so because we are so oblivious. We have handed so much of our ability to think freely and to act freely in our own lives as sovereign beings. We've handed that over to people that we think know more than us. And so we give them all this power. We give them all this authority over our lives. And he talks about how dangerous that can be to just willfully hand your sovereignty over to another human being. It's dangerous. Here's a really great quote that came out of some of his statements that I captured. One of them was, only by enjoying this life to the fullest, by becoming a free spirit, can you become who you truly are. And I think somebody else had also mentioned that as well. It plays on itself. When you're willing to be free enough to step into who you truly are, you also discover who you truly are. So there are elements and components that definitely do play into each other. So today I want to highlight 8 different aspects of what Friedrich Nietzsche in his book talks about in regards to being a free spirit. What does that look like in your daily life? What are the attributes? What are the aspects? And if you guys come up with others or want to contribute to the conversation, then please feel free to do so. So the first one is self-mastery. If you're going to master yourself, there has to be a knowing and an awareness of who you actually are first and foremost. So you got to get comfortable. You've got to step into a place where you can come to know what your likes are and what your dislikes are. What are you willing to say yes to? What are you willing to say no to? Saying yes only to those things that are in alignment with your highest will or God's highest will for you, but also being willing to say no to those things that hinder that block your progression and that block your soul's true expression. Nobody has the right to hinder that or block that or tell you what you can and cannot think, say, or do, right? Failure to develop self-mastery can lead to depression and anxiety and living a life in despondency. And you can go through life feeling very depressed and unconnected, not knowing who you are. And as a result of that, you start making poor decisions, you give in to get along, you buy in to the fact that society's pointing at you and telling you that you're wrong, and then you start feeling like somehow you're not enough. And so there has to be a level of self-awareness first in order for us to develop self-mastery. If you want to master who you are, come to know who you are. That's really, really essential. And I think it requires, to some degree, it requires a very good, sound mental toolkit, good tools for helping you to develop that awareness of yourself so that you can make better decisions that are in alignment with who you are. Do you sabotage yourself? Do you give in to get along? Do you hold back a portion of your truth in order not to hurt others? And, to some degree, that's okay too, if you're coming from a place of compassion, but also a place of truth inside of yourself. So these are all definitely things to consider and ponder on. He says, in order to be a free spirit, it is essential to be the master over yourself, to really come to know yourself. There has to be a level of awareness there. Okay, principle number 2, aspect number 2 of a free spirit is definitely somebody who's willing to think outside of the box, somebody who is willing to think differently than the whole group norm, right? They're willing to abandon groupthink, group ideology, or even, some of their own poor habits. They're willing to abandon those things as a result of self-mastery and self-discovery, right? Self-awareness. They're willing to abandon those poor habits that aren't in alignment with themselves anymore. And also willing to step away from how the culture is being programmed to think and act and speak and behave. That takes a tremendous amount of personal power and sovereignty to go against the grain, to swim upstream, to be the only one, right? The only one speaking out against something that you really feel like, no, that's not in alignment with who I am, sorry. Or to be willing to say to people, I'm sorry, that's not going to work for me. Or I'm sorry, that's out of alignment with where I'm going. And so I'm out, takes some courage, definitely, but definitely standing in your own personal power and your own sovereignty to get to the place where you're willing to step outside of the box or think outside of the box. One thing that Friedrich says in his book in regards to these kinds of people is that to go against the peer pressure, to go against the grain. Let me just read what he says. He says, free spirits are more prone to self-development. They develop new systems and new ways of living. If everyone was a realist, no one would have ever invented the airplane. And I love that because, it is the free thinkers, the free spirits on the earth who are the ones who push the limits, who think outside of the box, who dare to be different. And being different can be terrifying in some respects, because you're going to experience, to some degree, you're going to experience some shaming and some shunning. People will push you away because you're not like them. You're not willing to go along with the group mentality or the group think. And so if you express the ways that you are different and the ways that you maybe not disagree, but just the ways that you align with better than what the group is doing or saying, getting out of your comfort zone. Yes, Katie, thank you for sharing. That is what we're doing. Is to be a free spirit, you've got to step out of your comfort zone and be willing to be bold. That takes a level of personal power and sovereignty, but also courage. Because you are going to get pointed at. People are going to point at you and go, look at that guy. What's he doing? It's like, have you ever been to a party and there's music playing and somebody's out in the middle of the dance floor, just wildly moving their body around like crazy and making a fool of themselves, but they don't care. They're having a good time. They're enjoying themselves. They're laughing. They're being playful and totally liberated from the cares of worrying about what other people think about them. So that is a free spirit. That is freedom. Can you imagine? I don't know that, like, through the majority of my life, I don't know that I've really ever been a free spirit up until recently. I've been more willing to step into that freedom and sovereignty a little bit more. And I am noticing that the freedom of spiritual autonomy and sovereignty feels good. It's amazing. It's amazing to let go of worrying all the time about what other people think about you. Like, who cares what they think about you? Some things that he expresses in regards to being willing to think differently, being willing to get out of your comfort zone, is that he says, it requires being open-minded. You have to be willing to be open-minded. I remember a woman coming to me one time for private mentoring, and one of the things that she said to me was, Janet, did you know that scientists have now discovered that fairies are real? And rather than sit and make fun of that statement or laugh or raise my eyebrows, I just said, you know what? I'm open. I can't prove that they're not. Like, I'm open to that. I'm always open to new thoughts and new ideas, because who are we to put a limit on or a cap on what truths are out there and available to us? Who are we to cap the possibility for accessing deeper levels of truth? So, and that takes courage. The other thing that he recommends and says about being a free thinker and being willing to think differently is that you got to ask a lot of questions. You have to ask the question, why? Why are we doing this? Why asking the question why to everything that you think that you're supposed to do? And that can be scary, because when you push against the authoritarian voices in the world that are telling you, no, this is how it is. This is how you think. This is how you're supposed to behave. This is how you're supposed to act. This is what life looks like, and I'm going to dictate it to you. Sometimes it's scary to ask the question why, because you know darn well that you're going to get pushback. Nicole says, it's a waste of time to tell trailblazers, dreamers, creatives that they're going the wrong way. We know that's the point. We don't want to go where the current path leads. Dr. Thema. Is it Thema? Thank you for sharing that. That is awesome. Okay, principle or aspect number 3 of being a free spirit has to do with learning to live with all the contradictions. Do you guys notice? Do you sit sometimes on the internet and just silently observe all of the contradictions that are out there? Let me give you an example. This is a very good example. Sometimes in religious culture, or maybe not even religious culture, just having different opinions about different things because you know you're right, because you've done all the research and you've done all the study and you've done the critical analysis of all of the people who have pontificated on this topic, and your opinion is right because you feel you've done the most study. And then there's somebody else coming up in another camp that feels, no, we're right and you're wrong because we've done all of the study that goes in the opposite direction. And so then you just get all of this banter back and forth. And so a free thinker is someone who can learn to live within the chaos of contradiction and be okay with it. Like it is what it is, and I'm okay. Like there can be black, there can be white, and they can both be right. You can have separate different points of view and ways to come about your conclusions and both be right in a meaningful way. And so I think a free thinker in that way has the ability to look at life from an objective point of view, an objective perspective, and just allow people to show up the way they do without being triggered by it. Letting people come to their conclusions of their own accord and being okay with that without you getting grossly triggered and having to retaliate. It's holding space for people rather than pointing the finger and saying, you're doing it wrong. You're going the wrong direction. You should stop that. You need to repent, right? You're deceived. Because we often hear things like that. And so I think a free spirit, a sovereign spirit, is willing to just silently observe those things and sit in the neutrality of it and say, everyone gets to have their own experience. And who am I to persuade you in your personal individual path? Shauna says, I usually feel when I've given my opinion, I won't go back and forth on it. I said what I meant the first time. Yes. Yeah, just state it one time. You don't have to defend it. You don't have to come back and defend it. Just say what you mean, put it out there, and that's enough. And here's the thing too. I've noticed for me, on this path of discovering my own personal sovereignty. I've had to really do a lot of soul searching to begin the process of discovering my own individual sovereignty. But I've noticed too that I'm less likely to stand on absolutes and say, this is the truth and I know it. I know this to be true. I know that to be true. And I vehemently testify that I know this to be true, because I've found for me personally that often what I vehemently declare as a truth, and that might change tomorrow. Like I might see it in a different light tomorrow and have a different idea about that truth the next day or the next day. And so I think it's being willing to have an open mind and an open heart to the truths that can come to you. And often truths can invite you to shift your perspective, to shift your direction. And that's okay. It's okay that maybe what I felt and believed and thought about 10 years ago is not necessarily the place that I'm in right now in this moment today. And that's all right. I don't have to stand on fixed mental positions. I can evolve as a human and learn new truths and develop new opinions and new ideas and new methods of living my life. So this learning to live with the contradictions, I think it's really about being willing to see beyond the right or wrong, good or bad, and being willing to just have an open mind, hold space for people, while at the same time not conforming to one side or the other, not fitting yourself into one side and trying to prove over and over and over that you're right and they're wrong. Because what if you're both right? In some aspect or in some way, what if you both are standing on elements of truth? You're just seeing it from different vantage points or different perspectives. So free thinkers don't fit themselves into boxes and stand on their soapboxes and proclaim the truth to the world and then vehemently defend it, because they're so open. They're so open-minded that they're willing to be wrong. And they're also willing to be right, but they're willing to have a different opinion tomorrow if something else comes to light. Okay, I'm missing some here. Katie says, I often find God reminding me that each person, each soul is in their own personal journey with him, and that their truth may be different than my personal truth because their journey is different than mine. Exactly. I love that. And that thought process shifts to love, loving that person where they are in their journey with him. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That is a wonderful perspective to have, just meeting people where they are without having to defend yourself, without having to get triggered by where they're at on their own journey. Because oftentimes where other people are at in their own journey, they're going to see things very differently than you. They're going to hold different vantage points, opinions than you, and it's easy to get triggered about those things and then go into defense mode and prove that you're right. But I love this whole mentality. A free spirit is one who holds space for people to be right where they are. You know, I can remember back a time in my life when I was not awake to the truths that I am awake to now in my life. And it doesn't feel good to be judged and shamed and finger pointed at when you don't know something yet. But yet I had good, very, very good mentors in my life, people who, even though they were maybe in a different space than me, at least in that concept that I was awakening to, even though they were in a higher plane, a different space than me, they were still willing to just sit here face to face with me, hold space for where I was at without judging or without proclaiming that I'm wrong or I don't see it clearly. So I just love that. I love that in order to get to that place of being a free spirit and accepting where people are at, love is the key component there. Friedrich Nietzsche also says, in order to be a free spirit, we need to be able to allow ourselves to accept the contradictions around us that something can be black and white at the same time. We don't have to fix everybody, and we don't have to be fixated within the confines of certain boxes. Following a moral system bluntly forces you into boxes that compel you to adopt one extreme idea against another. Free spirits do not fit themselves into boxes. So principle number 4 is free spirits are experimenters. They go out into the world and they test things to see, okay, what fits for me? What feels right to me? Where is my soul pulling me and leading me and guiding me? And that might pull you out of boxes that you have found yourself in cognitively or culturally. And so, but be willing to have the courage to explore your own curiosity and experiment on the things that you're discovering. He says, a free spirit is a monster of courage and curiosity, a born adventurer and discoverer. The vast majority of people are bound spirits, prisoners of beliefs that have been programmed into them by their parents, by government, by education, by religion, all of these different societal groups that, and it's human nature for us to form ourselves into these groups where we feel like we're like-minded, but then as the group evolves, they want to press in on everybody to be as like-minded as they are and to think exactly the way that they do. There's this expectation that everyone within the group must think the same way, and it's not necessarily true. So free thinkers have to be strong enough to seek truth and adventure, take those adventures. Something that I thought was really interesting, he brought up the story of Christopher Columbus. Christopher Columbus had to have been a free spirit in order to venture outside, literally, physically. The fear that was being projected onto him at the time in his life when he went out to discover the world. Something I think is a really cool element of all of this is that this concept of adventuring, being curious and being comfortable and courageous enough to go out into the world and experience something different. So traveling the world, maybe moving to a different state, a different country, a different part of the world to get a different vantage point, to test it out and experiment, to see, how does this feel to live here or to step here or to stand here? So that was one of the things that he actually did a lot. He traveled the world. He lived in various different places to get various different objective viewpoints in order for him to come to his own conclusions and formulate his own opinions, not just stay in his own little cultural upbringing and box where he had originally been raised. And I do think that there's some wisdom to that, to getting outside of yourself, getting outside of your own space and experimenting and taking adventures and going and discovering how other people experience the world. I do think that there's value in that because it helps you to formulate new vantage points, new opinions, new ways of looking at life and at the world. So he says, try to be more adventurous in your life. One of his quotes, I'll share this with you. He says, you can never truly know what's good for you unless you test the opposite of what you're currently doing. A free spirit is never afraid to take their chances. So testing the opposite of what you're currently doing. Principle or aspect number 5 is fighting against tyranny. We talked about that a little bit in the beginning when we brought up some of the attributes of free spirits. And I actually do agree with this, the fighting against tyranny. If you've ever noticed in the world, free thinkers are usually hated by those who seek to control the narrative, those who seek to control large groups of populations, whether it be education or religion or government or the workforce, whatever it might be, free thinkers are typically hated by those people who seek to manipulate and control. So a free spirit actually becomes the enemy to those who seek control. And so there is a level of courage that is required if you're going to step into being a free thinker, but also fighting and resisting against tyranny. And a lot of people who stand up and fight and resist against tyranny are the ones who do it at the peril and the risk of their own lives. But they know so confidently who they are and where they stand and what they know that they're willing to sacrifice their lives for that. And as a result, I think that it becomes a nuisance to those who seek to manipulate and control. So here's another quote. I think that I think this is really good. He says, "Wherever there's been tyranny, the solitary philosopher has been hated, for philosophy offers an asylum to a man into which no tyranny can force its way. The inward cave, the labyrinth of the heart, and that annoys the tyrant. In seeking truths, the free spirit becomes an enemy to all those who seek to promote ignorance and control thinking, gaining power over others." I think that's all I'm going to share on that. But I do think it's important to consider and to ponder on, what does that look like in your life as we are faced with a huge amount of leaders and authoritarian voices on the planet at this point in time who seek to control the narrative. They seek to control your thoughts, your actions, your behaviors, your physical autonomy. So this is definitely things that we have to consider. How willing are you and how courageous are you in regards to standing up for your own truth, your own inner ability to think the way that God designed you to think? Number 6, be authentic. What does your conscience say? What is your heart telling you? Where are you being pulled? What direction are you being pulled to go in order for self-discovery, to discover yourself, but also to discover your relationship and your interaction with God? Another quote. Oh, actually, he says in his book, he says, you should become the person that you are. You should be free to become the person that you actually are without having to feel coerced into bending into what others say you should be. He says, once we understand that we are limitless, we shouldn't have prejudice about ourselves. Authenticity means being honest regarding our emotions and to take responsibility for our inner work. We need to be honest about our likes and our dislikes. We need to be honest about our opinions, our tendencies, our emotions. And those are hard things. Sometimes we deny our opinions, our emotions, our beliefs, the inner narrative that's going on inside of us. We deny those things so that we can be liked and accepted, so that we can find ourselves in favor in certain relationships. And that's a dangerous game to play, because eventually, through that process of codependency, you lose yourself. Changes in our mood and emotions are extremely important. As annoying as they may seem, they are an expression of our freedom. The more you listen to them, the more you are free to allow yourself to be. So I guess the point in there is stop avoiding life. Stop avoiding truth that lives inside of you, that's trying to bubble up and out of you. Stop allowing others to squash that truth. Goals in life are meaningless unless your happiness is assured along the way. We cannot ignore our tendencies and our emotions when we pursue a goal. We should always connect our thinking with our feelings. And that's what we brought up at the beginning, is that a free spirit is one who has pretty good balance between their thoughts and their emotions and their beliefs and convictions, and they stand in the truth of that. Even even at the peril of having to be humbled by looking inside at what's really going on. What am I really feeling? What am I really thinking about? What are my intentions? What are my desires? What's really going on inside of me? What is motivating me to want to move down this path? He talks about this being authentic. The more that you're willing to step into the authenticity of your own soul as you get to know yourself, that again, that takes step number one, which is self-mastery and self-discovery. But as you get to know yourself, this is the recipe for self-confidence, is learning how to become more and more authentic in who you really are, what you like, what you don't, what you're willing, what you're not, what your emotions are, what your motives are, what your intentions are. To be free requires you to be authentic. And I love that. I think that's a very powerful statement. It's about going with your gut feelings. It's about acting on promptings and impressions, but not apologizing to the world around you for the answers and the information that comes to you through that divine process of getting to know yourself and coming to know where your path leads. You don't apologize for that, even if it does make you look very different from everybody else. Have the courage to make unreasonable decisions. If your gut feeling tells you to go in a certain direction, go in that certain direction. And don't take a job just because it's the right thing to do, or it's the reasonable or practical thing to do. Go in the direction that your gut is calling you. And that takes some level of courage to do that. But if you're willing to step into that more and more, you find you have more confidence in who you really are. Anybody have thoughts or ideas in regards to some of the things that we've talked about so far? Being a free spirit, having the courage to step out and think outside the box and to be authentic and to show up the way that you do. Feel free to share. I would love to hear you guys' opinions. We're on step number 7, I think. Well, actually, let me finish off step number 6, or not step, but principle number 6, which is authenticity. He talks about think with the mind and feel with the heart at the same time in order to really develop yourself as a complete and whole, autonomous, sovereign person. So be willing to use your intellect for sure, but don't let your brain run away with the narrative and talk yourself into things that go against your gut feelings, because it's the practical thing to do, or it's what everybody else would do. Be willing to come from that place of wholeness. So step number 7, I guess these are not steps really. They are aspects of the free spirit. But aspect number 7 is to be joyful. Have you noticed that when you observe free spirits in the world around you, like I want you guys to just sit still for a minute and think about, close your eyes, think about a person that you know or a person that you've come across in your lifetime who was a free spirit, who really lived in their authenticity with boldness, without apologizing for who they were. How did they show up in the world? And did they have a lot of joy? Were they funny? Did they have a sense of humor? Did they dance a lot? Did they laugh a lot? Did they not care about how people think about them when they're in social settings, moving their bodies around or blurting out whatever comes to mind? Let's think about that for a minute and give me more definition, if you would, as to what did that person do that set them apart? What were some of the things that you observed about them? Were they more confident? Did they shine? Did you notice things about them that you would like to see in yourself? If anybody has a story around that they'd like to share, I'd love to hear it. Love, love, love. So being joyful. Let me share a quote with you. And we should consider every day lost, which we have not danced at least once, and we should call every truth false, which was not accompanied by at least one laugh. I love that. I think that's awesome. Don't you find that free spirits often have a very healthy sense of humor? They don't take things too seriously. They don't get too wrapped up in their fixed mental positions about stuff, standing on their soapbox saying, I'm right and you're wrong. They're just free. They dance, they laugh, they don't take things too seriously because they know, I think ultimately, that everything in life is temporary. Your visit here to the earth is a temporary visit. This isn't long-term here. And so he says, let me quote his words. He says, laughter represents a special form of knowledge, giving us a fresh perspective over life, to understand not to take things too seriously because everything is temporary in the perspective of continuous evolution. Shona says, I can think of people who display free spirit in some aspects, but not all. The only person who comes to mind fully for me is Jesus. Yeah. Yeah, I think I've been the same way. Sometimes you see little glimpses of what it truly means to be a free spirit in others. But as far as the wholeness or the completeness, the fullness of it, I do think that Christ is the perfect exemplar of that. He holds each and every one of these attributes. He wasn't afraid to go against the grain. He wasn't afraid to stir the pot. He wasn't afraid to, not that he was intentionally trying to offend people, but he wasn't afraid of causing offense in somebody else, of contradicting somebody else's fixed mental positions, because he stood in the truth of who he is and who he was. One of the concepts that came up in this book as I was going through some of the attributes is that he says we put too much focus, we put too much importance on things that come and go. We cling too tightly to things that come and go. So, and I don't want to downplay, when someone loses a loved one, but he talks about how there's no meaning in being depressed for long periods of time over the loss of your loved one, because you know that we're all going to go. We're all going to die at some point. We're all going to expire, and it is a part of life. It's a part of the process. And so he says there's no meaning in getting depressed if you've lost your job, because there's thousands of other jobs in the world that you could potentially do. There's no meaning in being depressed or anxious or sad over the loss of a relationship, because look at how many people live on the planet. There is the potential for thousands and thousands of other meaningful connections with maybe possibly someone that is more in alignment or more capable of supporting you in your life. So he says serenity equals being aware that nothing lasts forever. You find serenity in your soul, in your that inner peace in your soul, when you recognize that things will come into your life and they'll go out of your life, and that's okay. It is what it is, and I'm okay. And that leads us to aspect number 8, which is the final aspect of being a free spirit, which is not getting so deeply attached to people or things. Free spirits can live their life with or without. And that's not easy to do, because often we're programmed in our world to be clingy. And so aspect number 8, here's a quote that I can share. He who has attained the freedom of reason cannot attach his heart too firmly to anything or anyone. He must have in himself something wandering that takes pleasure in change and transitions. So free spirits look for change. They're ready, they're waiting, they're excited for change. And change can be a very meaningful experience, but not devastating to them because they don't have this clingy, codependent attachment to the thing or the person. So don't be dependent on anyone or anything in order for you to feel complete and made whole. To be free does not mean only freedom to go wherever you want. It's freedom to speak your mind. It's freedom to have any job that you seek to pursue. It's freedom against tyranny, but it's also psychological freedom. The freedom to be the expression of who you really are as a sovereign being inside of your relationships that you're in. It's really easy for us, and in the culture that we live in, we are conditioned more towards codependency than any other condition. So we have to, sometimes what can happen to us as we get into these relationships, we get possessive, we take ownership of that person, they're mine, right? And as a result of that, that can partially be very unhealthy because that can create a prison for the person that you're wrapping those chains around. Can create a prison. You can lose yourself in a situation like that. So it's not being dependent on someone, such as a spouse or a parent or any other significant other in a relationship, even your children. It's not to be dependent on money or material things either. Everything in life is temporary, including your relationships. So at least physically, in the physical close proximity, you could lose a loved one at any given point in time, and that close proximity is temporary. It doesn't mean the relationship goes away, because I do believe that the nature of relationship is infinite and eternal, and that aspect of relationship doesn't ever diminish. He says a great test for a human or for a free spirit is for someone to see whether or not they can live long periods of time without anyone around them. So in isolation. And that's not easy to do. It can be very difficult to do, especially if you are addicted to companionship of someone else. The attachment is not really the problem, rather to remain stuck in a particular situation or paradigm is the problem. So if the relationship is causing you as an individual not to progress, not to grow, and it's causing you to feel stuck or damned in your life, then that's when the relationship becomes the problem. The clinginess in the relationship becomes a problem. So as human beings, I do think we are hardwired to want to connect. Yeah, Tammy says Jesus was and continues to be a beautiful outlaw. Yeah. Jesus knew he would die at some point, and he still stood in his truth. That is so powerful to consider. Yeah. Oh, I forgot this other part. Carla says loved, open-hearted. Yes, feeling loved and open-hearted in relationship. Shauna says, I can think of people who display free spirit in some aspects, but not in all. Yeah, we already talked about that. The only person that comes to mind is Jesus. Yes. Okay. Sorry, I reread that twice. Seeking connection. So in talking about seeking connection, I think that as human beings, we are hardwired to want to connect in a meaningful way with other humans. I think that it's healthy for us to connect, but not if we're not sovereign, not if there's not autonomy. If there's no room for autonomy and the other person in the in the relationship is trying to cling to you or wrap chains around you in order to preserve their connection with you, then that's not healthy. And in some aspects, I think people really do deserve at that point to exit the relationship, because nobody has the right to cling to you so tightly that it prevents you from your own personal progression and improvement and sovereignty and your own personal path. And there are those who would argue the point that, oh, but there's give and take in relationship, and to some degree you have to sacrifice a portion of yourself in order to be in a bonded relationship and have companionship. And I guess to some degree that is true. But where it crosses the line is when it starts to take away from a person's ability to progress on their own soul's, their own individual, unique soul's journey. That's when it becomes, that's when it crosses the line. So in order for a relationship really to be healthy, and in order for two free spirits to come together, there has to be autonomy. There has to be room for that. There also has to be room for sovereignty. And then once those things are in place and the person can stand in their own free will and in their own truth, then there can be interdependence, but not codependence. There's a huge difference. And then, you know, in that interdependency, that's meaningful connection, because then two people are just sharing the best parts of themselves with each other. And yet each one knows full well that they're free to leave at any given moment if they want to. But in that freedom, they will always return if they're left free to do so. But if the reins are too tight, the chains are too tight, there's too much clinginess going on and too much codependency and control and manipulation going on, when that person breaks free and does depart for a time, they're not coming back. I guarantee you. They will develop, they will discover their own individual sovereignty and agency and free will and autonomy and go, I love this. And they're not coming back. But in a relationship where there's freedom for that self-expression and that self-exploration, the person will always find their way back because that freedom is there. In fact, one of the quotes that he gives, yes, Carlos says vulnerability. Vulnerability. I think I've mentioned this book before, but I'll mention it again. There's a really great book put out by Deepak Chopra called The Path to Love. And if you get that book and all you ever do is read the first 3 chapters, you will have read enough, because it's so good. But one of the things that he talks about in there is that true love is not going around in life trying to latch on to people that can make you feel whole and complete. That's not the point of true love. The point of true love is 2 people that are sovereign and individual and autonomous, that then come together and share the best parts of themselves with each other freely, autonomously. And then they're willing to surrender to one another. That's ecstasy, because there is trust, there's vulnerability, there's openness, there's not attachments that are unhealthy, chains. People will try to chain themselves to you, whether it's your spouse or not, but people, you'll find this as a free spirit. People will try to chain themselves to you and suck energy from you, or try to put limits on the way that you're allowed to think and reason and experience life. They're going to try to put rules around it. They're going to try to tell you you're doing it wrong and you should repent, or you're wrong, or whatever, right? Trying to control the way you express yourself or behave or believe. And that is codependency. That is unhealthy attachment. And so to some degree, free spirits have to find a way to kind of pull back from those kinds of relationships and still maintain their sovereignty and autonomy while still continuing to be love. And that's not easy to do. True love cannot exist without freedom. It can't. Because the opposite of true love is manipulation and control and coercion and clinginess. And I don't think that we realize many of us have those tendencies because of social programming and family programming. I think we often blindly don't realize that we're doing it, but self-awareness is the remedy. Where are you clinging to somebody else? And so you've got to be willing to completely and profoundly and totally let go of that person if you want to maintain a healthy relationship. He says, the best relationships are the ones in which you have all the freedom to be yourself and that you're free to leave anytime, but return to over and over again. The great love you find in its nest. Okay. Wow, we are right on the dot. That was an hour perfectly. Any thoughts, any ideas, any ways that you would like to contribute to the discussion that we just had today on being a free spirit? What are your thoughts and what are your ideas? Maybe questions or comments? I'll give you about a minute. While we're waiting, I would love to encourage everybody to just drop down into their body. Ashley says it was a great eye-opener. Good. Just drop your attention, your awareness down deep into the body. And just connect with you. Connect with your soul. Connect with that truth that lives inside of you. And notice what it feels like. Breathe in and breathe out. And as you exhale, let go of and release all the tension that you can find in your body. Let those muscles soften. Just let them go. Breathe in, breathe out. Keep your awareness within, dropping down all the way down to the base of the spine. And I just want you to notice what it feels like to be you. Give you about a minute to just feel into that feeling of you. What do you feel like inside? That is what you remain true and faithful to. Because it is that part of yourself that is one with the mind and the will of God. So if you want to be plugged in and connected to God, be plugged in and connected. Go within and connect to yourself first. And feel that love that God has for you in there. Feel all the approval and the appreciation and the acceptance and just the approval. Think in your mind, what would it look like if God was standing in front of me, looking into my eyes? What would the look be on his face? Whether God to you is a father and a mother, look at them. Look at them both in the eyes. And how do they look at you? How do you receive that love? Do you take it in or do you have prejudice against yourself? And keep breathing into that space. And then are you also willing to hold that kind of space and that kind of grace and that kind of appreciation and approval for yourself? Are you willing to let go of disapproving of yourself? And are you willing to be open to the true self? Okay. Thank you guys for being here. Everybody was very quiet today. I noticed. And that's okay. As you have further thoughts and ideas on this topic and on this concept, I would love it if you share, I'm going to be posting this on my YouTube channel. So if you watch the replay, then feel free to comment and share your experiences with what freedom and sovereignty of your soul and your spirit looks like for you in your life. How have you experienced it? What things have you learned on your journey of self-discovery and the discovery of how you relate to God in all of it? Yes. Nicole says, this was wonderful. Thank you so much. I took so many notes, also typing a lot. Yeah, that's okay. This is the beauty of having a replay. So before I actually let you go, I'm going to cut it off here as far as the recording, but before I let you go permanently and shut this off, a little bit of housekeeping, just some things to be aware of. The last year, all of our classes for the weekly classes, the theme was manifesting miracles and healing the past. It was a really great year worth of learning how we as sovereign individual independent souls, how do we manifest, how do we project out into the universe and create the life, the world that's showing up for us. And so we had lots of great discussions, lots of great classes around all of that. If you have not yet done so, you can purchase that entire, there's like 50 hours, over 50 hours worth of content. You can purchase that in the course on janetthurgood.com. You can just go to myname.com and click on courses. You can purchase that entire course, all the replays for the whole year. I can't remember what the price is on it, but I do know that I have dramatically reduced the price on the thumb drive. So if you would like to get access, not just the online program of that, but access to the replays of the classes from last year, I have dramatically reduced the price on just this little thumb drive. If you would like to get it in this format, please reach out to me. I'll let you know what the cost is and how all I do is slip it in the mail to you, and I can send you those. A lot of people have been asking me for those replays because I did not post all of the replays on YouTube. You'll never find them. So some of the classes, they were only seen once by live participants. So you can get access to those by purchasing one of these. They're not super expensive, pretty reasonable, I think, for 50, 60 or more hours of content. And so if that's something that interests you, feel free. Also, some of you have been receiving phone calls from my marketing and promoting team. We're running a wonderful special on the program that I've put together called Greater Life, Greater Impact, which is a certification program for those of you who feel compelled to do this work as a meaningful work, as your life's work. So if you would like to become a life coach in quantum healing, learning quantum healing techniques, and also teaching people about spiritual sovereignty and self-awareness, then please reach out to me and I can get you more information on that. And that is if someone has not already contacted you, to let you know. I have my team contacting, there's over 2,000 or 3,000 people on my mailing list. And so I've had them reaching out and contacting people and just letting them know, hey, we're running a wonderful special right now on that program. And so if you have felt compelled that this is your life's work and you would like to learn from this program, you can get 6 different certifications in anything from anxiety clearing to allergy release to weight loss to spiritual awakening to all kinds of other things that are amazing. And I teach it through the tools of quantum healing. Shauna says, I can think of people, wait, we already did that. Sorry. This was wonderful. Thank you so much. I took so many notes, typing a lot. So much gratitude. Love and light to you all. Thank you, Jesus. And thank you, Janet. Oh, awesome. That was great. Okay. And yes, people are messaging me about the thumb drive. I will, hang on, let me just take a screenshot of that. Awesome. Okay. Thanks, you guys, for reaching out. If you didn't get a chance to reach out to me about a thumb drive here, you can also message me in Facebook. What was the name of the book again? Let me I actually did not read the entirety of the book, but the book is called Human, All Too Human, A Book of Four Free Spirits by Friedrich Nietzsche. And he spells it Nietzsche. And I can maybe post the link to that when I post this on my YouTube channel. So watch for the replay. Feel free to share the replay when it comes out. And you guys have a great rest of your day. And everybody take care. Go out there and practice figuring out what it means for you to be a more free spirit than you have been. All right. Take care, everybody. Mwah.